Hello, everyone. Welcome to the One Necessity podcast. My name is Manny Talavera, and I will be your host this evening. For those of you returning, it's a pleasure to have you back. Your love, support, and encouragement these last couple of weeks means the world to us. You have left us feeling motivated and inspired to continue onward with this vision. For those of you that are new, welcome. It's an honor to have you. A little bit about us, who we are, and what we're doing. We're a team of creatives, directors, producers, therapists, life coaches, photographers, and videographers who have come together to create a documentary film dedicated to men's mental health. We believe that through authentic conversations and thought-provoking discussions, we can begin to break down the barriers on this important topic. Our goal with these podcasts is to leave you with valuable insights, practical tools, and new perspectives on life by featuring a wide range of guests, from therapists to doctors to facilitators and people from all walks of life who have powerful stories to share. With that being said, I'm really excited about today's podcast. I believe that by the end of this episode, we're all going to be left with a powerful tool that we can use to help navigate life and all its ups and downs. Today's special guest is Danny Silva. Him and his fiance are founders of Hanu Yoga Studio, Miami Beach. Check them out if you're in the area. He is a former MMA, boxing, and jiu-jitsu competitor, and he is a mindset, breathwork, and meditation coach. Danny, welcome. It's an honor to have you here, brother.
Thank you, Manny. Honored to be here as well.
Yeah, man. I took your breathwork class a couple months back, and the way you delivered that class allowed me to tap into this powerful tool that I had within me that I didn't know. And so I knew that I would want to do a collaboration with you because I feel this is some easy and powerful wisdom that you have that people can benefit from.
No, I'm so happy to hear it. I'm so happy to hear that people, the public, right? The cultural paradigm has shifted and people are now becoming aware of breathwork and starting to understand the benefits of it, right? And it's a beautiful thing to start to see happening, that it's entering the cultural paradigm, right? And it's a tool that's necessary more now than ever, right? Because where we are entering as a collective and as individuals is we are in a place in 2024 where all of us have become addicts. We're all addicts to our phones, right? And we are all constantly being bombarded with external stories, trying to tell us who we are, what we are, trying to divide us, right? Trying to stir emotion, right? And it's constant and continuous, and we're all trapped in this web of stories in the mind, right? And the breath is a tool like a samurai blade to slice through that web of thoughts, right? To clear the space for you to connect deeper to who and what you truly are, right? And that practice goes infinitely inwards. And it's a beautiful practice. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, but the onion is you, right? And it keeps going deeper, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it's transformed my life. It's been the most powerful tool in my life. It's been the foundation of who and what I am. And it's something that never ends. It's a continual practice. It's what I'm going to be doing to the end, right? Till the very last moment, to that last breath you take, right? That's the culmination of the whole entire practice of everything, right? That's what the samurais believed, right? That last moment, right before you die, how you go out is the culmination of your whole entire life and defines who and what you are, right? And can you find that place of tranquility and transition into the unknown, right? Smooth and beautifully. And the breath that's just one piece of it, right? But it's everything.
So then before we get deep into it, I think it would be good for you to give us some context as to who you are and where you come from and what you had to deal with before you started searching for answers within yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So I didn't come to this practice through a traditional route, through a class or through a lineage. I found this practice in one of my darkest moments, right? When I was 19 years old, I was incarcerated for 3 years. And I was in one of the darkest places there was, right? Like it was pure, raw violence. It was as dark as you can get. There was no light. There was no place to turn externally, right? I found myself in a situation. There are no friends. There's no therapist. There's nobody to turn to, right? There's nothing external. All you have is yourself, right? And in that space, I started my spiritual journey, right? I started looking inwards. I started with the Bible. I read the whole Bible, right? And then I started like going into different philosophies and different kinds of religion. I went into Islam. And what I discovered over time was I came across Buddhism, Zen Buddhism specifically, and I started studying Zen Buddhism. And it started resonating with me deeply because what I recognized in that situation was we have the ability to adapt to our physical environment. Before I got incarcerated, I was concerned with like the actual violence, being incarcerated, right? Like being trapped. You adapt to that. My suffering no longer came from that, right? Like I adapted to that quickly. I recognized the suffering was all here, right? In the mind, right? And I realized everybody around me was trapped in that same place. At night, the scariest humans on the planet. Some of them were murderers, like the hardest people you've ever seen. You would hear them screaming, right? At night, like begging for help, crying, right? Like breaking down mentally, right? I saw, and they would medicate people and they would turn them into zombies. And I saw that it was here, right? Obviously there was a lot of physical violence that you had to deal with, but that became easy, right? It was here. And all of us right now are trapped here, right? This is where almost all of our suffering comes from right now, right? And right now in 2024, most of us are fortunate to be living, right, in where we don't have to deal with physical violence, right? Or we don't have to hunt for our food, right? We're not struggling externally. The struggle's here. And that's what I recognized first. And I recognized through these practices that I have the ability to control my thoughts, to control the emotions, right? But the first thing was recognizing that I was trapped more here. So that's the first step of these practices, right? You're starting to recognize your stories that are trapping you. And we all have them, right? And some of them have been stories that have been ingrained in us and have been running since we were children, right? And most of it was me looking back at my past and beating myself up about the mistakes I made or worried about the future. And in my mind, I was suffering because I was 19 years old and I wished I could be out with my friends. I wished all your friends are partying at that time, right? And I'm in hell, right? And I realized, okay, I can't keep killing myself wishing I was somewhere else. This is where we are. Wherever you are is accepting it. That is step one. Not wishing I was somewhere else, right? Being fully in the moment. And these breathwork practices, these meditation practices pulled me into it, right? And I was able to start to find control. It took time, right? But I had nothing but time, right? I had nothing but time to practice, to work with these different meditation techniques until I can start to find a place of calm, right? Where I was no longer suffering. That was the first step, to eliminate the suffering that was happening here, that I was self-inflicting upon myself, that all of us are self-inflicting upon ourselves, right? And as it got deeper, I reached a place through these practices where I experienced, I don't know what the right word is, but it was bliss, it was happiness. Like I felt joy, which I hadn't felt. It happened like at the 2-year mark. Yeah. And I hadn't felt that at all, right? I hadn't experienced any of that. No kindness, no positive emotions. And I felt it, and I felt it coming from inside. And I remember that day distinctly. I'll never forget it. I was still in hell. I was looking around. There was no hope, right? I wasn't sure. There was people getting killed around me all the time. There was gang wars. I didn't know if I had a future, right? I didn't know if I was going to make it out. People around me, right, that are much scarier than me are getting killed, right? Am I going to make it out? I don't know. Am I going to make it out in one piece? I don't know. Am I even going to get out? So, but in that moment, I recognized I have joy here now, and it's coming from within. Nothing external is necessary. I don't need anyone else. I have nothing, right? And that thing, that space inside of us, that place of calmness, of peace, of tranquility, of joy, right? All of us have it, but it's buried under all of these stories in the mind, right? So that's where it started. That's where it started. And that was 20 years ago, and that transformed my whole life. And then from there, I shifted. I was going one way in one direction in my life, right? Making all the wrong decisions. And that's where I made a turn, and I recognized and I took accountability for all the things I did.
How does meditation and breath work go hand in hand?
So for most of us, these stories are way too powerful and strong for us to just sit and silence the mind, right? That's what a lot of people think about. That's what a lot of people try to do. And for most of us, that is not possible, right? That's not possible, right? So first, it's understanding what the actual meditative state is. All of us have touched it in one form or another, right? You may have not sat in the lotus position, right, meditating, but you've touched the state of meditation. A lot of people think and they talk about like emptiness, that your mind is empty. You've touched it in peak moments of your life when you are in flow, right? For some of us, it comes through running, through sports. It happens in dancing. It happens when you're making love to somebody, when you lose yourself in the moment and you're fully immersed in the moment. And you're not thinking with your analytical mind, right? You are just connected with everything, right? In that moment, the analytical mind is off, right? If you look at people that are at the peak of, we could use sports as an example, right? Any sport, right? Michael Jordan, right? Or LeBron, they're not thinking, they are just flowing. It is coming out of them. If you're thinking, look at an artist, right? That is in the moment, that is downloading the art, it is flowing through them, right? That is the meditative state, right? It's finding that in stillness, being able to find that. But to get to that, like I said, just in the middle of the day when there's a million things going on is very difficult. So what breathwork is very specific. It's a wide range of different ways to manipulate and control the breath, right? To either start to calm the nervous system down, to influence the nervous system, to slow it down, or we may want to activate the nervous system, right? To release adrenaline, endorphins. So there are different ways of influencing the nervous system, and how they flow together. For me, my practice is I need to do intense, powerful breath work to cut through the web of thoughts, right? To start to cut through that and get into a place of clarity. So I use powerful forms of breathing, and there's a wide variety of different forms of breath work to first start to quiet the noise. And that allows me to enter the meditative state much easier, right? So they work together hand in hand, right?
I see that. It's a powerful tool to, like you said, quiet that noise which we're bombarded with from the moment we get up.
Yeah.
The moment we turn on our phone, we turn on the TV.
Yeah.
Everything is like screaming chaos to you. And so because after taking your class, I've added it to my morning practice, and that breath work does get me clear and connected to this flow state that you're speaking of, you know.
Buddhism was interesting because the way it was very different from Islam, Christianity, and Judaism in those traditional monotheistic religions, right? God is outside of you. It's a different entity. It's a being that is looking down on you and that is judging you and that can help you, and the power is outside, right? Buddhism had a completely different framework, right? That all of it is within, going within. And it provided me with a completely different framework of understanding who and what we are, but also how the mind works, right? It's really a philosophy of the mind. And the concepts that it presented me with first resonated deeply with my situation and understanding the source of my suffering, that I was creating my suffering. But it's challenging. It's challenging to pull yourself out of these patterns that you've been following for, since you were a child, right? So the first step was recognizing what are my stories that I'm trapped in? And I identified them like distinctly, right? Like these are my stories and my places where I spiral into suffering, right? Identify them, map them clearly, right? And that's the first stories where I spiral into suffering, right? And the challenge is catching yourself, identifying the triggers, catching yourself. That's the first step. The second step is starting to identify what are the triggers that pull me into those stories where I spiral into suffering, right? And the challenge is catching yourself, identifying the triggers, catching yourself, and recognizing it so that you can start to create space between these stories that you feel are a part of you, and you can start to create space between the stories and who and what you truly are, right? Like starting to create that separation. And that's hard in the beginning, right? And then also just sitting into the stillness was extremely challenging in the beginning, right? I struggled with it until I started coming across different forms of pranayama, different forms of breathwork that allowed me to get into it a lot easier. Right. So in the beginning, I tried there's many, many different forms and styles of meditation. There's many, many different forms of breath work, of traditional pranayama. Right. And even till now, right, it's a process of finding the practices that work with you. And what worked for me 10 years ago is different from what works for me now. Right. So it's an exploration process. So I was going through an exploration process, but I had nothing but time. Right. I was in this cell. I was in an incubator where I can just go deep into all of these practices.
Dope, man.
As we're starting to learn how to quiet the noise, how to recognize the stories, right? And how to connect to the space, what's behind there, right? What's behind the analytical mind that is running these stories? And what's behind there is pure, raw consciousness. And that comes out of you when you're in a flow state. Right? So in order to access flow, you can't be in a highly anxious, nervous state, right? Where your mind is running. It's not possible. You can't be extremely agitated, angry, or overly hyped up, right? You're not going to access it. But on the flip side, you also can't be like in this foggy state. You can't be too tired, right? It's like this perfect balance, right? So the breathwork techniques, there's different techniques that we start to learn how to influence the nervous system. Sometimes we need specific strategies and techniques to take us out of this highly stressed, agitated, anxious state to calm the nervous system down and bring us back to baseline so that we can start to access flow. And there's other times where we're tired, we have no energy, we're foggy. So there's other techniques that we use to activate the nervous system to pull us back to the center. And sometimes we have to go back and forth, right? I like that practice, moving from intensity to stillness until I can find balance. And once you are in that center place, then you are no longer thinking and you can start to access that flow state. Right. And that flow state, like I said, can express itself in so many different ways. It can be physically through like sports. It can be through dance. It could be through creative practices. It could be through art. Right. Sometimes it's just accessing that flow state to find the answers for the places where you are stuck. Right. Not with this, but with this. Right. Connecting to your inner wisdom, your intuition, your heart. Right. That also comes to the surface when you are in flow, right? Because the mind isn't thinking, and all of those things come to the surface.
And your thought pattern, man, when you're able to step into that flow state to think about possible solutions to a problem, you're suddenly presented with many options.
Yeah,
but when you're triggered, you see red, you see one thing, man, so being able to tap into this powerful tool to then shift your emotional state so that you can have some clarity of mind and how you want to move forward is an invaluable tool, man.
It's incredible. And so the stage is how I present it to a beginner, right? If we're a beginner and we're talking about breath work, right? How can I access it and what are the benefits of it? Level 1, right, is it provides you access to feel deeper into the body, right? And when I say that, I mean feeling, using the breath to connect to all of the respiratory muscles, to understand proper breathing mechanics. 90% of the people, more than that, right? Maybe 99% of the people that walk into my classes don't know how to breathe properly. I work with people that have been yogis for 20 years, professional athletes. Everybody is breathing wrong. So learning proper breathing mechanics and learning how to start to feel what is happening inside of the body. That's called interoception, our ability to feel your heartbeat, to feel the breath traveling down into the bottom of the lungs, to feel your lungs expand, right? And that's something that can be developed and enhanced over time. That's level 1. And if that's where we are, that's where your work is. That's fine, right? Once you can do that, then you can start to recognize that you can influence your nervous system, right? And that is a superpower. When you can pull yourself out of this state of high anxiety, when you can pull yourself out of this state of brain fog or, of doubt, of not believing in yourself, right? To breathe into your power, to start to influence the nervous system, then you can start to control the mind, right? Like, if that's where you are, that's a beautiful stage as well, but it continues to go infinitely deeper, right? Then you can start to access these transcendental, mystical states, right? The mystical experience is available to all of us, right? The mystical experience that you read about in all of these religions, right? All of these sages and these gurus, right? It's available to every single person, right? And it's accessible through the breath, right? So there's so many different layers to it. There's so many layers to it. And at the deepest level, it deeper than providing us access to all of these things, it allows us to begin the awakening process, right? Truly awakening, starting the process of awakening to who and what we truly are, where we truly are, right? Recognizing all of that, understanding all of that. And that's not something that can be communicated through words, right? I can't tell it to you. You have to start to feel into that, and it comes from within.
Right. A lot of my personal growth has been through experiences. There's wisdom in reading and hearing people speak, and then there's a whole other type of wisdom from experiences, where now you realize there's a lot more layers to who I am than I ever could have imagined. What do you tell me about when you're in that flow state, that suddenly you are connected and the chatters is cleared in that space? What are you thinking of? Are you just standing still thinking about nothing? Are you taking a moment and then visualizing what your day can look for, what you want to bring? Is it prayer? What is it for you?
It's experiencing what you just said, right? That's what this is all about, is direct experience, what your experience is with it. And it goes infinitely deep, right? Like when you go deep into the practice, I'm no longer here. I'm no longer sitting or lying down. I've completely dissolved inwards, right? And that experience is hard to actually encapsulate with words, right? It's similar to psychedelic experiences that people have experienced, right? It's that. All of that is accessible. When you fully dissolve, when I'm at my deepest level of it, there is no Danny. There is no Danny meditating. All of that is gone. Danny is a construct. It's just a construct, right? That construct disappears and you go all the way in to the essence of what we truly are, which is pure consciousness. Pure consciousness has no form. It cannot be encapsulated by any model or construct. It is the source of all life, and that thing is impossible to put into words, right? It's an experience that has to be had. But as I come back from it, right, then I can start to move it intentionally. As I start to come back into my body, right, then I can start to do the things that you're talking about. I start to integrate that space with this reality, who I am, where I am, right? How do I want to live my life?
So what does masculinity mean to you?
Okay, so to define it, I have to give you a broader framework of like what I believe all of this stuff is, because masculinity fits into that. From my direct experience, like with these practices, is there is a singular source energy where everything comes from, right? You can call it God, you can call it Allah, the Tao. There's so many different names that it goes by, right? But it can't be encompassed. Like no name is actually what it is. It's beyond definition. And that source energy first separates into polarities, masculine and feminine, right? So the true masculine and feminine energy, it's the yin and yang symbol, right? It's the breaking up of the whole, right? If you look at the yin and yang symbol as a whole, it's one thing, right? But it can be separated into two. And so masculinity, it's not something throughout my life that I ever consciously thought of. It's just something that, like, you know, for me, I was and I experienced in different ways, right? So I think it's different things in different stages of your life. When we're young, right, as boys, right, like we have that like energy, right, to like go out, and like for some of us, we don't know how to channel it, right? We get into fights, we get into trouble, right? So that's that primal instincts that are inside all of us, right? Like when testosterone starts to build up when you're teens and you start to like feel all of that energy. So I think what I was fortunate to find was martial arts, a way to discipline, right, that energy, right? That energy isn't bad, right? Like we have that energy, like it's part of us as humans, right? Like you start to like become interested in women and girls, right? And like sex starts to overcome your mind, right? And you're looking for like power, and your ego is starting to build, right? And you want to build who and what you are, right? That's part of what we are, right? That's a necessary part of who and what we are, but having a discipline to try to understand it and control it. So martial arts gave me that. I was fortunate, right? Because I had a lot of that in me, right? So channeling it, learning how to do it. Most of us don't have a way, and boys are not taught how to accept those energies, right? There's nothing wrong with it. It's what we are meant to do, but it's learning how to channel it, right? And I think that energy channeled properly, right? That gives you the opportunity to start to build who you are. That's what you want as a young man, right? You want to build your character. You want to build success, right? All of those things. It's having a discipline and a practice to use that fire constructively without hurting other people around you, right? But as you start to get older, like for me now, I've started to recognize that, yeah, the first half of your life, you're building who and what you are. You're building your skills, your wisdom, your value, right? You have to go through experiences. You're going to make mistakes, right? That is part of it. That's how you gain wisdom. Knowledge is just what you read in a book. Wisdom comes from experience, right? And wisdom is what we're looking for, right? And then once you start to get older and you start to become an adult, for me, what's come naturally is the second half of my life, I'm still working on myself, but that's not the main focus anymore. Now it's of service, right? That's what I think the masculine becomes, right? It's becoming a father, right? Like truly embodying strength and wisdom, true wisdom, right? That you've cultivated through your life as a young man, through the mistakes that you've made, learning from those mistakes, right? And the second half of your life is about protecting, taking care, right? Like, what can I give back? Who can I help, right? Who can I help? Who are the young men that are coming up that are lost, that are going to make the same mistakes that you made, right? What wisdom, what can I give them? What tools can I give them, right? Who are the people that are weaker than me that need my strength, right? It's not just physical strength, right? It's like this strength, right? That you've cultivated over time, right? And this is a continual process, right? I know that as I get into like my 60s and 70s, right? Like it's going to mean something different. So I think it's constantly changing and transforming. And it's not just one thing, right? It's not just one thing. It's not just one set of characteristics. And for certain people, just like for certain people, math comes easy or strength is easy. And some people have to work on it, right? For some people, they have a lot of masculinity in them, and other people may have smaller amounts in it, right? There is no right or wrong, right? It's how you work with that energy, how you express it, right? And for me, as a man, I think finding a discipline is critical. Without it, that energy just runs out of control. You see it like when you go out to like a bar or something, right? Like every man has this like urge to like test themselves, and they feel like they're meant to be doing some stuff, but they've never had an outlet to do it, right? They're working in an office in a cubicle, right? So that's why it comes out and they drink and they fight and they do dumb shit, right? Like they don't have any discipline, any control over it, right? Understanding how to interact with women, with the sacred feminine energy, right? Like every woman is an expression of the sacred feminine of the mother, right? Like starting to see it from that perspective, right? Not giving in, recognizing that we have built in us, right? Our primal instincts, right? That like you want to, like it's inside of us, right? Like when you're a young guy in your teenage years, you're trying to fuck everybody, right? That's the way it is, right? Understanding that that is a primal urge that you can start to discipline, right? And that what we are as human beings, both men and women, right? All of us, we're in this very interesting stage where we still have strong primal instincts that like you have to recognize and accept, right? You can't deny them, right? A lot of people are starting to shame and like deny those things, accepting, understanding those are still in us, right? In all of us, right? But we are also starting to awaken like the spiritual. So we are the merging of the primal and the spiritual, right? And that's a tough dance, right? That's not an easy place to be, right? The merging of these two things, right? And it's learning how to control these primal things, understanding that they are part of us, but that we are evolving into something greater, right? And we are connecting deeper into the spiritual and we're starting to awaken. So it's two different things. It's those polarities and working with them.
So by you stepping into this masculine part of you and accepting it and learning to channel this energy, how did that change from how you used to deal with feminine beforehand versus how you deal with them now?
Yeah, of course. It's totally different. Yeah. And it's a growth process, right? First, one of the greatest pieces of wisdom that I learned when I was in prison, there was a lot of wisdom I learned in there. One of the older guys told me, right? And I was young, right? So like a lot of times young men, their ego gets built by being able to be, or, you know, like date the prettiest women, or sometimes multiple women, right? That builds their ego, right? They start to feel like they are somebody because of that, right? And a lot of times it's manipulation and all of this stuff, right? Like that's how they're doing it, and they're trying to build their ego. And I remember he told me, he was like, if you are lying and deceiving women, you're not a man, right? A real man is real and honest, and he stands his ground. He doesn't have to lie. He doesn't have to hide things. He speaks his truth, right? And he doesn't deceive any of those things. That was one of the first things that changed my mindset as a young man, right? Like I felt myself getting pulled into that, right? Like it feels good to have like beautiful women and stuff, and that starts to build your ego. But if you are being deceptive and not speaking your truth, right? And trying to like deceive people, that is not it, right? So that was the first step, right? So there is no lying, right? There's no lying. There is no cheating, none of that. Like that for me was the first game changer. From that point on, I've never, ever lied to a woman. I've never cheated on a woman, right? Like I learned deeply from that, right? And it grows as my practice got deeper and I start to get deeper into this practice. I started to understand the feminine more, right? Like more intimately what it was, right? It's not getting caught in the trap of like objectifying the other, right? And truly looking past the surface level and recognizing what is underneath, right? And like I said, like for me, the biggest part, most of this came through my psychedelic experiences, right? Was understanding and recognizing that every woman is an expression of the sacred mother, right? And treating them as such, right? That was it. That's been the biggest progression and change over the years.
So it's it's a huge shift because, like you said, as we're growing up and you're in your teens and you're watching music videos and you're watching movies and everything around us objectifies women. Yeah. So you don't even know what you're doing or why you're doing it. You're just doing what you've seen your whole life, right? And in switching your view on women from an object to now this divine mother or the divine feminine, how does your interaction with women change then? I would imagine their guards are down, you're connecting with them on a deeper level.
Yeah.
What was that experience for you?
Yeah. So for me, it came through, like, the real change and catalyst for me came through a psychedelic experience, right? It's not something that's for everybody. For me, it was a powerful teacher, right? DMT was one of my master teachers. And in that experience, every time I do it, almost every time the sacred feminine appears before me, right? And I bow in front of it. And sometimes I cry and I apologize that I'm not being the man that I'm meant to be, right? That I should be. And in this experience, I went through that phase. Like I remember distinctly, it appeared before me and I just cried. And I was just saying, I'm sorry, right? For not being the man that I know I can be. And then at the end of it, it told me clearly what I had to do. It showed me that, like, subconsciously, every single one of us, whether we know it or not, when we come across the opposite sex, you're subconsciously categorizing them as this is a potential partner or it's not, right? And it told me you have to eliminate that, right? You need to eliminate that distinction and recognize that every woman is the sacred mother. Every one. So it told me to eliminate all relationships, no dating, none of it, right? Create friendships, create connections without the sex component. And I had no intention of doing that right before this experience, right? But I trusted, right? I trusted. And it took some time, but I reached a point where I rewired my brain. You can rewire your brain, right? Neuroplasticity. You have the ability to create new neural connections in the mind, right? So I reprogrammed the way my mind was working. And I went through a long period of celibacy where I was genuinely just connecting to every woman as a friend. I was genuinely just trying to connect. There is no sexual component to it. We're just going to be friends, right? We're just going to connect as humans, right? Forget about friends. Let's connect just like that. And that changed everything for me. And I think that was a very important lesson. It opened many doors for me. One, as a teacher now, right? Like that ability to see everybody from that place, right? Because as you start to like get recognition, and as a teacher, one of the traps as a teacher is the ego, right? You start to have people come to you, right? And that's one of the traps that I've seen in a lot of people. And I'm grateful for that lesson that I went through, that whoever comes to me, right, I'm seeing them from that place. I'm looking at them as it's all the sacred mother, right? Coming to you for help in different forms in different places. But the gift it gave me also is it cleared the space for me to find a partner, right? And to find love in a way that I haven't experienced before, right? And I don't think that would have happened if I hadn't cleared the space, if I hadn't created this new perspective and there's new way with interacting with women, right? And that is how I saw her. I still had no intention of dating her, right? But I think the fact that I was in that space where I'd cleared the space for her, it opened the door for me to now go deeply into a relationship in a way that I haven't before, right? And these deep relationships, when I was anchored now in this space, I recognize that like it's important as a man to go through your periods of isolation on your own, right? You have to learn how to find your inner strength on your own. And there's periods of life that life is going to give you those lessons, right? And it's not fighting in those moments. It's not wishing you were with somebody or anything. Like, It's learning, right? Find your strength as a man, because once you have that, then you can be a true partner, right? Then you can really hold the space and you can really connect to the feminine. And now I'm in a new growth period, right? Where I'm like, these instincts are starting to come up of becoming a father, right? Being a protector, right? Like all of these things are starting to come to the surface for me, like, but powerfully, right? And I'm not thinking about them. They're just happening within me, right? It could be biological, right? Like, I don't know, but it's coming to the surface and I feel it powerfully, right? That I want to provide. I want to be a father, right? Like, I want to, like, the next evolution of what
Right.
the masculine is, right? The next stage.
That's perfectly said. It is it's a part of our evolution as we grow. Once we have kids, it's a whole new terrain that you start to learn again, and you start to almost, at least for me, it's been my experience. A lot of times I'm reparenting the 9-year-old in me and the 11-year-old in me through my kids by doing things that are sometimes uncomfortable for me, but I'm teaching them like, hey, this is the path here. It's through the discomfort where you're gonna find the magic on the other side. Um, kids are a great teacher, man. They know you and they know how to press you and they know how to poke you. And the best thing that I can do for them and that we can do for them as fathers is to go inward and do the work so that we can become aware and heal the parts of us that need the healing so that we can then show them the way. So it goes hand in hand. You want to be a good father, you have to go in.
No, I love that. I love that, right? Like they say, like the greatest gift that I can give to other people is to do the inner work on myself. That's the greatest gift I can give to you, right? Is like to do the work on myself, right? To work on myself first. But we're trapped in this society where everybody's screaming at everybody else, telling them how they should be, right? Like, you're doing it wrong. You got to go in and do the work. And the healing is a big part of it, right? Healing is a big part, like doing the work. And that's how you start to heal. And for me, I've realized that like the deep like suffering and trauma can be alchemized, right? Like if you heard of alchemy, you know what alchemy is, like the concept of like you can transform coal into diamonds, right? And those deep places of suffering, of pain, can be alchemized into your strength, into your power when you heal them, right? And that's the process, right? It's not pushing these things away and ignoring them, right? And so a lot of people confuse it. A lot of people ask me, they're like, wait, are you telling me when I clear my mind, I should be like pushing away and ignoring my stories or ignoring like the suffering? No. What we're trying to do is clear your attachment and your stories of what you think happened, right? To clear the space first. Clear the space first so you're not connecting to it here, your memory of it or what you think it was or your definition of it, right? Or your idea as a victim. We clear the story until we can connect to this place of like pure awareness, pure consciousness. And once we access this place, then we go back and we see them from a different light, from a different perspective, right? And then you can start to find the meaning in it, right? So we're not pushing it away and ignoring it, right? We're just clearing the noise here so that we can see it from a different place.
Right. To re-encounter it with a new perspective. And a lot of times for me, the healing has come through the expressing of emotions. There's been times where I've been on the floor crying, working through emotions from past issues, but after that release, there's like a liberation. There's weights that you have been carrying that you didn't even know you were carrying that you let go, and you're like, and so then it becomes a something you actively begin to look. Because if every time I look inward and I find this pocket of pain and hurt, and I allow myself to explore it, and I allow myself to feel it, and I allow myself to let it go, my life upgrades in this area. Then, where else do I have these pockets that I'm not aware of that are pulling me down and I didn't even know it, and I may not know it until you let it go. So it becomes a beautiful dance of going inward, and for me, that's where the meditation, the breathwork and meditation comes in, because it quiets, and then it allows you to almost take control of the wheels. Like, okay, we're gonna explore within my being and see where I can become aware of these things that's holding me back from my own growth. You know?
That's it. That's it. Even till now, there's times in my practice where I just start crying, right? I don't even know why. I don't know the meaning of it, but it was something, like you said, deep down inside. And when you let it out, right, and it comes out, you just feel lighter. You just offloaded it. You let yourself feel it. You let it come out, right? So in my classes, there's people cry all the time, right? That's part of it. And a lot of people are shocked because they're just coming in and they don't know. They're not expecting that, right? This brings a lot of that to the surface. It allows you to breathe into these different areas in the body and these different kinds of techniques. Allow this stuff to start to come to the surface for you, right? And every time you go into the practice, it's different. I'm not trying to make myself cry. I'm not trying to not cry, right? I let it be what it is and let whatever needs to come to the surface come, right? That's the practice. And that practice, you're learning how to soften, how to let go, to surrender, right? But the paradox is, by learning how to surrender and give up all the power, that's when you truly have power, right? That gives you power. And it's a paradox. It's a paradox. It doesn't seem like that, but truly surrendering gives you real strength, right? A real solid foundation. So it's interesting, right? Because all of us walk into breathwork differently, right? Like, we have a different story. We're in a different energetic state. So it can mean many different things. And there's many different techniques, right? Some people were using the breath specifically to find peak performance. For some of us, we're trying to unlock our creativity. And for some of us, unexpectedly, right, these emotions come to the surface, right? And a lot of times people aren't ready for that, right? So the important thing as a teacher and as a facilitator is allowing them to let it out, right? This is the space for it. That's what the practice actually is, right? I sometimes catch people, right? They start to cry and, like, I feel them. I could see they're trying to, like, hold it back. They don't want to let it out. This is the space to let it go, right? Like, that is what the practice is about. It's releasing all of these things, and it's the space for it. So when it happens in the class, I let them know, right? Like, keep going. Just let it all out. Don't fight it. Don't resist. Let it all come to the surface, right? And that's a beautiful experience to go through with people. And I don't know what it is. It could be trauma from the past. I don't know what their experience has been, right? It's just there holding space. I'm not there to judge it. I'm not there to analyze it. I'm not there to give them answers, right? It's just holding the space and recognizing this is part of the practice. Let it come. Let it flow through.
And what they're feeling, are they always aware of why they're feeling it? Or is there something sometimes just feeling and then...
Yeah, sometimes you know and sometimes you don't. Like I said, for me, sometimes I don't even know what it is. It's something that I had here buried inside. I don't even know specifically what it is. I didn't even know it was there, and it just comes out, right? So sometimes we can find meaning in it, but sometimes it's just about releasing it, letting go of the weight, right? That you didn't even realize you're carrying with you, you know?
So to close off, why don't you guide us and teach us the proper mechanics on how to connect with our breath?
Sure. So this is the most important step, is recognizing and understanding and fine-tuning your breathing mechanics. Once you have this is the foundation that can allow you to go into much more advanced breathing techniques and meditation techniques. So if you're going to practice along with me, if you're seated, allow your head to gently rise as if being lifted by a string on the top of your head, and allow that to create some length in the spine. Relax the jaw so there's space between the teeth. Rest the tip of the tongue behind the top row of the teeth. And the first step is being able to bring your awareness to a single point. So bringing all of your awareness to the edge of your nostrils and simply connecting to the sensation of the breath entering and exiting the body. Tuning out all of the other signals and seeing how deeply you can tune into this signal. Now, instead of inhaling up the nostrils, you have nasal passages that move through the face. So as you inhale, send the breath directly into the back of the throat. Take a moment to connect to that. It's a slightly different sensation. Good. And if it's easier for you now, you can place one hand over your chest and one hand over your belly. And now follow the breath as it travels in through the nose, into the back of the throat. And what you want to do is send the breath all the way down into that bottom hand. So breathe into the belly. So notice if as you inhale, your chest expands. Chest isn't moving. So what we want is as we inhale, the belly expands outwards. And as you exhale, navel contracts into spine. Can you feel that? Visualize what is happening inside of your body. As you are inhaling, your diaphragm, which separates your rib cage from your abdomen, is descending downwards. So as you inhale, the diaphragm should descend downwards, pushing the organs of the belly out so that the bottom of the lungs can expand. And as you exhale, your diaphragm should lift back up into the rib cage, creating space for the navel to contract the spine. So this is the first step. Finding this, for most of us, when we inhale, we breathe into the chest. So finding this diaphragmatic breath where the belly expands as you inhale and navel contracts the spine as you exhale. And then the second part is we find it by maybe wrapping our fingers around the side of our rib cage. And the second major muscle of respiration that we want to connect to are the intercostal muscles in the rib cage. So as you inhale, you want the rib cage to open and expand laterally. So as we inhale, the rib cage expands. And as you exhale, the rib cage contracts. So you are inhaling, getting wide, opening up the rib cage. Visualize yourself creating space between the ribs. And as you exhale, it contracts. Good. So now we're going to thread it all together. And what I like to visualize is if I was filling a cup with liquid. As you pour the liquid into the cup, the liquid travels all the way down to the bottom, spreads out 360 degrees, and then fills upwards. So as you inhale, send the breath low all the way down as if you're breathing into the pelvic floor. Fill the belly 360 degrees. Once that is full, we start to fill the middle of the rib cage 360 degrees all the way to the top of the chest, and then we exhale it back down. So learning how to connect to that, learning how to breathe deep into the bottom of the belly, expand the rib cage 360 degrees, fill all the way up, and exhale. Starting to feel into that. Good. So this is just a warm up, right? Like activation process, seeing if you can feel into it. For some people, this is going to be really challenging, right? They may not be able to do it. There's different specific techniques that we use that are more hands-on to kind of feel into those spaces. But this is the first step. Being able to feel and access all of the respiratory muscles. And just like other muscles, right? They can be strengthened. They have the ability to expand, to stretch. And that is going to be the starting point, the foundation of moving into more advanced, deeper techniques, right? We need to be able to breathe powerfully and strongly when we need to in moments of challenge, right? The mind is also very strong, so we need the breath to be able to be strong. But on the flip side of it, we need to know how to breathe softly when we need it. And it's everything in between.
Danny, it's been a pleasure having you, man. I feel like I've learned a lot. I hope the viewers have learned a lot. Tell us where we can find you, where we can attend one of your courses.
For sure. Yeah. So I teach weekly classes at Hanu Yoga Studio in Miami Beach. You can find me on Instagram. I also offer virtual classes. It's O2 Flow, the letter O, the number 2, FLO. You can also check out my website, www.o2flow.com. Reach out to me there or through Instagram, any of one of those channels. I'm also hosting regular teacher trainings, workshop events. We're going to start traveling throughout the country, visiting different cities now, trying to kind of teach these practices and go deeper into it. So feel free to reach out to me in any one of those channels.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you. I appreciate you, brother. Thank you. Thank you, guys.